Hello, hello, hello everybody. Welcome to Ttna in our first episode of 2022. This is so awesome, y'all, to be like kicking in the new year with y'all. I'm so excited for what Ttna has coming up for us, but on that note, I know we just took a holiday hiatus and we kept talking about, oh, I can't wait for what we have coming up for 2022. So let's talk about some of the big changes that happened. And really, there's one to talk about. I am your host, Abby Booker, and the show is produced by Jasmine Pickens and the Debate Boutique Network. Now, for those who've been here for a minute, right, y'all know that Jasmine Pickens is our CEO, our crown jewel. Jasmine has came on Ttna before, gave us some amazing insight, as well as really helped in mentoring me in terms of how to not just do Ttna, not just to be someone who gets on the camera and talks about some different really important things to discuss, but also on the debate side, which is behind the scenes, not something we really see on the show, but how to work with students, how to help with argument and research development, how to do the debate work as well, right? Jasmine has just been an all-around mentor and the best supervisor who I've ever had the experience of not just working for, but working with. Now, Jasmine made the decision that I wish we could all take note of in terms of the respect, the courage, and the self-love that came from this choice, and realize that coming into 2022, well, Jasmine loves the Debate Boutique Network, the company that she raised, that she founded, that she's been the CEO of. She realized that the journey that she's going on doesn't involve Debate Boutique at the moment. So Jasmine is making the choice to step down, really respect it, and love everything that you have done and will continue to do. And I've made the decision to become, and not just me made the decision, but Jasmine, me are working together during this time, but become the CEO of Debate Boutique Network. I made the choice in my personal life that this is something that I would be willing to step up to do. Now, that being said, there's a lot of mentorship that I am going through right now. So just how to kind of edit and produce my own videos, since that's something that Jasmine took on the responsibility of as the CEO. But during that time frame and that transition and that education that, again, thank you, Jasmine, so much for helping me with, I just want to make sure it's known that this episode is produced by Jasmine Pickens and, again, produced by the Debate Boutique Network. Now, I'm excited where we're going with 2022, especially the things that Ttna have, and I just want to take a moment to really pay some respect, really show some love to the queen of the Debate Boutique Network. Thank you, Jasmine, for everything you've done. Thank you for entrusting me with your DeBaby. And I say DeBaby as in debate baby for those who aren't, so familiar with debate. But thank you so much for everything you've done, everything you'll continue to do. And I'm really excited for the future opportunities that I know I will have to work for you, work with you, and as well, you come back and be on this couch with me. Okay, y'all, so enough of the sentimental thing. It's not a good way to start the new year with me starting to get to a point where I'm gonna tear up thinking about all the memories, because y'all, me and Jasmine go back to debating in college at the same time, linking up at tournaments, okay? So there's more than just this business relationship. There's a care for an individual here, but I can't go there. So let me go here. And here as in, what are we starting 2022 off with talking about? Now, Debate Boutique, or specifically Ttna, is not the place where, in general, we get into conversations about just celebrity drama, right? We're here for okay, bigger picture concepts. Let's talk about something relatable and the larger issue. But today, we want to start off talking about something that is a larger issue, but a certain relationship really exemplifies what the hell the problems are. So today, y'all, I want to get into dating. Now, dating itself is a tabloid topic at times. It's controversial. It's something that's conflicting, right? It isn't, you have different opinions. Someone else has other opinions. What can you make work? What can't you make work? And also, the big question is, who should you date, right? Who should be in your box? Who should be outside your box? And family influence, cultural influence, your own race, your own identity, your own personal experiences all shape who it is that you can match up with and who it is that you should just stay away from. So we are going to begin to discuss dating, but not in just a superficial, oh, I just want to give you all advice as to who you should. No. We're going to discuss Khloe Kardashian and Tristan Thompson. And I want to talk about interracial relationships and the way that fetishization of interrelationships always kind of have this I hate black women on the side note type of vibe. And not every interracial relationship, but specifically relationships that are founded in a similar way that Khloe and Tristan are founded on, and the ways that the afterlife of slavery kind of structure these relationships. But that's a really big statement. I'm kind of giving y'all the full picture, so let me kind of get to the update portion, right? So we're not going to go too into detail about what's been going on in the relationship, but for those who are like, yeah, I really don't care about the Kardashians because like they're anti-black, they be like stealing black culture, they be not promoting black people, and they be saying messed up things, which I totally agree and support. I'm so sorry my Twitter feed chooses to show these things to me, so I can't not talk about it. But just a quick update on that, right? So Tristan and Khloe started dating in 2016. At the time, Tristan was with a black woman, also by the name of Jordan. I say also because y'all know where I'm going with this, but also by the name of Jordan, who was pregnant with his child at the time. He was cheating on her with Khloe. Then they started dating. Khloe sat here and said, nope, I didn't steal nobody's man. I'm not no homewrecker. And Jordan was like, yes, you are. We were dating at the time. But honestly, tabloids very much so quickly dismissed Jordan. Very irrelevant. They were focused on beautiful, pure Khloe Kardashian. Now, they ended up having a child, True, who is a child of Khloe and Tristan. And then a little bit later, we have some cheating scandals. Okay, so Tristan decides that he wants to cheat on Khloe with Jordan Woods. That's why I said another Jordan, y'all. Jordan Woods. Now, Jordan Woods was 21 at the time, best friends with Kylie, who is Khloe's younger sister. So they cheat. Jordan sits here and explains like to everyone, comes on social media, has a red table sit down and is like, yo, Tristan came on to me. It was at an event, at a party, and it was one kiss. And then I left. I wasn't sitting here having X, Y, and Z with Tristan, right? No, Tristan came to me. But also, let's not forget that Jordan was 21 at the time. I don't care what we say. I've been 21. I just turned 24. I'm still a kid. I am a kid. I don't know left from right in terms of how to navigate the world. I'm just doing my best. So we need to have that same understanding for Jordan, right? Put a pin in that because we're going to come back to it. So we have this first cheating scandal. The Kardashian family uses Jordan as a scapegoat. They flame her. Kylie's like, we not best friends no more. Khloe's like, you're a backstabbing person. Kris is sitting here orchestrating it all behind the scenes because she worked harder than the devil. And Jordan just gets like blacklisted for this period on social media until black people who have channels started giving her the time to talk. Specifically, right, when I think of the Smith family and talking to Jordan about like, okay, what really happened? And Jordan talks about like, yeah, as a black woman, really the only black woman allowed to enter this privatized Kardashian clique, this was hard and this felt targeted. And there were other things that were racialized behind the scene that she had to sacrifice just to be Kylie's best friend. But that's a whole other tangent that maybe one day we can get into. Now back to Khloe and Tristan, right? So Khloe takes Tristan back. People are like, girl, are you sure? She takes Tristan back and then Tristan cheats again, which was not unexpected because you got the man how he was, a cheater. So they get back into a relationship. Tristan then cheats again. It goes back and forth, total of 3 cheating scandals, and it turns out the most recent one, right, is Tristan got another woman pregnant who is also not a black woman. So she's pregnant, she had his child, and it turns out it happened when him and Khloe were still together because they broke up later for like another issue. They were working on their relationship and no, didn't work out because old girl pop up with his baby. And the fact is that in like his apology statements, he's like, Khloe, you don't deserve how I treated you, which shows that like he knew what he was doing, but also that he was cheating on her, even if, you know, Chris is trying to keep that secret by not making it established to the tabloids that they were dating. But anywho, right, this woman takes the internet, she's mad, Tristan lying on her, she like, fine, let me post the receipts. It's this whole celebrity gossip thing that people are like, okay, I'm eating this up right now because it's interesting, it's drama, we thrive off drama, whatever. But another factor during all the time that they were getting back together is True. Now, True is their daughter, and I'm gonna just share a moment with y'all. I come from a divorced family too, so when it comes to divorces, like, yeah, there can be parents who can remain close, remain that best friend thing, but there's still boundaries established. And when those boundaries were broken in terms of excessive attention given to each other, the justification was, oh, we're just trying to keep a happy picture for True. So I want to think about how True, the black daughter, was used as a commodity, a selling point to the tabloids to justify what they was doing behind the scenes. But basically, if y'all get where I'm going, I'm setting up this picture to have a conversation, right, about no matter what happens when we think of like this type of relationship, no matter how we want to think of this relationship, there's this common factor of this international fetishization of black men or blackness that happens by white supremacy, this sexual desire that happens by white supremacy, yet also this conflation of colorism, as well as this hatred for black women. And the ways that these three structures can work together to establish how an interracial relationship between a white woman and a black man is supposed to operate. But before we get into the next portion, the upload portion, we move on in our segment, I want to give y'all a second to update yourself. Now, not necessarily on what's going on with Khloe and Tristan Thompson, because at the end of the day, like, okay, but more so to think about your own personal positionality. So for all of my non-heterosexual and cis black people out there, I want to think about how the spectrums of gender, of performing sexuality, of the type of biological coding factors, right? All of these different structures, colorism, shape the ways that you're able to experience types of relationships. How does it influence your own ability, your own thought process of who can I date and who can't I date? And then for black, heterosexual, cis men, I want you to think about it in a very, very in-depth, right, type of, dang, okay, is this what I do? Is this not what I do? Do I like turn away from black women for certain reasons? Do I have preferences? What is it that constructs your own dating? And for everybody else outside of blackness, think about how you interpret blackness when it comes to dating. And be critical of it, because when you're thinking about this self-reflection and honesty, you can't sit here and try to justify your thoughts. Don't justify anything, just say what it is. List it all out, and then let's get into the justification later. So I want everyone to take this personal moment and breathe. Okay, y'all, welcome back. I hope we all had a second to just breathe, think about our own positionalities in these constructs of gender and identity, colorism, anti-blackness, and the way that it shapes our own looks or desires for relationships? What is it that we're looking for in a relationship? What is it that our own check boxes that we have to mark off to decide if that's someone who we not only want to, but socially can be with? But kind of to pull up where we left off, right? We had some like large framing questions that we dropped throughout our update portion where we're like, okay, so the idea of fetishization of certain positionalities is a thing that plays a huge role in interracial relationships between white women and black men. But also this undercoded hatred or competition against black women also is a huge key factor in structuring this desire that individuals have that they can only have satisfied by a specific individual, such as this relationship that Khloe and Tristan have together. There's certain things they both want, and they only can receive that from someone of that opposite positionality, i.e. Tristan can only get what he wants from white womanhood, and Khloe can only get what she wants from black men. Now, I say that, which I know people are going to point out, oh, Tristan dated like black women as well too. Yeah, that's why we plugged colorism, because colorism also plays a factor in this conversation where the women that were black that Tristan dated were very light skinned. And I'm just adding that into the factor because there's a certain level of detachment from blackness that comes with fetishizing lighter skin. So that's important to keep in mind as we, really upload ourselves into this conversation. So the two things that I kind of want to use to help frame our analysis as we go through this together, right, is that there's typically two different narratives that we hear when it comes to why black men don't date black women, right? So the first one is the ignorant beyond ignorance, right? And that's what it's labeled as, like the ignorant perspective of black men being like, oh, I don't date black women because they're too difficult, because they do too much, because I have black women in my family who always caught an attitude for the slightest thing, such as me not doing dishes or X, Y, and Z, right? The things that were just like the bare minimum in terms of me understanding what's supposed to be done, to ways that black men be like, oh, that's exactly why I won't date a black woman who is like strong in her blackness. Now, that's kind of what we understand, hopefully, which I know we don't all because obviously people say it, but typically in the black community, if you like love your blackness, you understand that that's the ignorant type of way. Then we also have the woke definition, which is saying that, oh, because on the plantation, it became this stereotype of the absent father, as in the black man had his family used against him, his black family used against him, where his wife and children could be sold off on the auction block, tortured, or also assaulted in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to protect his family. So because he had his own masculine and love for his family devalued for centuries, it created a psychological impact where now there's a detachment between black men and black women, because basically just the whole black family network is completely shattered into a bunch of little pieces. Yeah, sounds woke because it uses history. It still ain't it, y'all. So we're going to get into today a little bit about the history and why that matters when we look at celebrity relationships such as Tristan and Khloe. So I'm going to pull back real quick on this first question of like black women too difficult. I'm going to pull back real quick and bring up a previous episode. So we talked in the Olympics episode a lot about how the ways that black womanhood is structured in opposition to white womanhood. So if you haven't watched that episode, I'm going to plug it now because I'm going to do a truncated analysis as to kind of what we had talked about then. So reminder, when we were talking about the idea of white womanhood, black womanhood, and also this establishment of law during this new age, the birth of modernity, especially in terms of the end of the Enlightenment period, and now we have the establishment of the American colonies, we have laws being established, but also identity being established at the same time. So there's this political and social structures that are being crafted. Now, as these social structures are being crafted, they rely on the political. So that means there has to be justification for certain laws by using what is socially morable. So that being said, we had to create a delineation between white womanhood and black women. Because if woman was the same across the board, then that meant whatever white women had, if we identified something in terms of just, oh, women deserve this right, black women automatically deserve this right. But at the same time, there's a moral code to it too. Like, oh, we're having sister talk? Yeah, that black girl over there can't be my sister. There needs to be establishment of my own morality and purity to, one, not just justify why I deserve certain rights, but two, to justify why I have the right to treat somebody in opposition. And what brings it deeper than that is we can look at certain trends in terms of fashion or dancing that were cultivated after interaction and exploration with Africa, such as the certain types of dresses that try to make it look like you have more curvature than what you had, right? Or when you look at dancing, it was something that was always very formal, yet after European exploration, it was like, okay, this isn't just for the purpose of like finding a husband, this also involves celebration, right? Praise. And yet women are also out here dancing with a lot less clothing than the 15, 20 layers I have to wear when I go to the ball just to find Prince Henry or whoever, right? So all of these different cultural exchanges made it so that way when we established what it meant to be a woman in terms of the new American colonies, it had to be very clear that black women were unable to access that due to nature, due to cultural norms, and due to the fact that political laws would not allow them to. So we really cemented this concept of gender because, again, gender is a social construct, and we use gender and tied it so strongly to biology, which we keep in mind the transphobia and homophobia that this has as well at the time, but we tied it so close to biology that we made it so that way if you are able to perform gender, then it justifies as you not accessing this type of positionality, so therefore even your very own genitalia are not something that you have control over. I.e., when black women are raped on the plantation, you are treated as cattle in the same way of being bred. The same way we think of, oh, my dog is a female dog, my male dog is a male dog, right? Ella, my dog, is a female dog. We use this terminology because you wouldn't refer to a dog as a woman, right? That term doesn't classify the positionality of a dog because it means a certain level of personhood. That personhood was performed through gender. So it allowed on the plantation for black women to only be classified as female bodies, as flesh, as not something that is able to perform certain characterizations or access to power that is necessary to be able to access the level, the societal level of womanhood. And that bearing of allowing black women to access womanhood was vital to the establishment of white gender, because then it allowed for the white woman to be pure. It allowed for the white woman to have political power, to have control, to have the ability to break the birthing barriers. And if they were assaulted by a black man, then their child could have the potential of becoming a significant person of society. Now that part leads into part two, which we now gonna pull on our R. Kelly episode, right? To talk about the ways that, in terms of the second portion of the statement that I said, where it's like, oh, because black men had this trauma on the plantation, it made it so that way there's a divide between the black community. No. Our R. Kelly episode showed that there's a psychological conflict, psychological competition that black men have with black women. Now that part is that since black women were unable to perform gender, right? That's why this Olympic episode is necessary, because that first historical analysis of like black women weren't able to access gender, but also not being able to access that performance or actual establishment of one's will, such as saying this is my body and therefore you do not have the right to do to my body what I wish or am okay with you doing, then that means that there are also other burdens placed onto black female positionality that are something that is in opposition to how we understand a nuclear, heteronormative, cisgendered, white, society accepted family, the white picket fence American dream family. And part of that was this law, this doctrine that was established in place, partus sequitur venturum. Pardon my Latin, haven't really taken it since 11th grade in high school. But anyway, this doctrine was established in place to say that, let me quote the phrase, that which is born follows the womb, right? So kind of truncated to like, the womb establishes the identity of the child, right? So this law was put into place so that way the traditional gender norms, such as the children get the last name of the father, didn't apply to slaves. Put into law, which is important to understand. It's not just a societal thing, right? This is how cultural norms transcend into politics to establish a foundation for how we understand both. Because when it came to the idea of this slave, no longer does the father have that gender right, one, to establish the child, as in they take the name of the child. They take the child receives like kudos to the father, that's established, which also in terms of certain cultures was really important too. That's not to say that different African cultures didn't have equal distribution of like social power, but rather it at times could be used or was to an individual a defamation of that own person's lineage. But anyway, in terms of white society, it served this purpose of one, creating a difference between white men and black men, but two, the main purpose was because white men, when they raped black women, it would produce an offspring that the white man didn't want to have shit to do with, okay? And that's not to say that white women did not rape black men. But one of the things I want to talk about too, or just put out there, is intensity. Violence can be the same level of suffering, but that doesn't mean the intensification of how that suffering meant is not different in terms of rates that things happen. That's not to say black men were not raped on the plantation, but the amount of black women who bore children by white masters was a different level than white women who were forced to bore children of slaves that they chose to rape. Because white or black women were not afforded any outs. And when I say outs, I mean whether the child was unborn or born. There were no outs. So that child was claimed by the legacy of what the womb previously set, which is you will be a slave because your mother was a slave. So your mother has named you. Now, we sit here and like, oh, that's hard because the black man lost certain abilities to establish his lineage. Are we ignoring? Because that's just the cultural narrative that we have of ignoring the suffering that this added on black women, the pain, the psychological, the physical, the trauma and violence that this had on black women. That this was not a privilege, y'all. This was not a privilege. This was a tactic of anti-blackness to oppress both, but then also to use the womb to be a conveyor belt for producing commodities, to be a factory of producing future labor work. That's what I'm trying to get at when I'm talking about this history between the differences between what we understand interracial relationships and how this psychology actually plays a role. So because of this divide, because of the womb establishing the legacy of the child, the taking away of that, and the law that was established into place, it looks like the only way, and I say looks like because we're going to get to that, but the only way for black men to reclaim that positionality of the master of the house. And I say master of the house as head of households, which we see on our taxes. Even that concept is gendered in an understanding that's supposed to be the man of the family, because these norms are established that only the head, the male, the dominant figure of the household, the one who's supposed to protect the family, but also the one who passes on their lineage, the one whose legacy is established, the one who is physically strong enough to do the labor that slavery completely abolished, all of those namesakes. Because black women were forced to be just as strong as black men when it came to the field. Black women were bred at the same rate that black men were on breeding plantations. Black women are the ones who made it so that their children would forever hold the legacy of slavery, because if they had a child, that child was a slave, and that was not a same burden of partus sequor ventum that was established onto black men. That legacy, that violence there, is something that was necessary, that was vital to establishing these moral, these ethical codes when it came to slavery. And that's what I want to look at when we're trying to understand interracial relationships. Because we try to say, right, oh, it's just because the black dad couldn't access certain positionalities. No, all those things that I just talked about, those burdens, those intensified forms of violence that black women had to experience, are reasons that not only do black men now have this psychological and subconscious, it is not something I'm sitting here saying that black men sit here and be like, oh, I just have this hatred for black women. No, that without having a full, in-depth personal analysis, historical analysis, and recognition of the suffering of black women, then we leave ourselves to have this gap that in this, oh, it's just because of this absent father that's the black man narrative, that we can just sit back and be like, okay, that's a woke understanding as to why black men say they don't like black women, when reality is the absent father isn't even the black man. The absent father is the white man. The white man who doesn't have to pass on his lineage to the slave child that he created through rape of that child's mother. The white man is someone who doesn't have to pass on his political and social power to this child, because that way it keeps the purity of the white family, it keeps his lineage clean, and it becomes his right to assault his property whenever he wants to, and it leaves the black woman to deal with all the burdens. The burdens of the world as being the mule of the world. Not only now are black women responsible in this time of slavery, of establishing this lineage of free labor, but then we get to the history period that we are in currently, where we look at interracial relationships and we look at this fetishization that white women have for black men, because there's this type of, oh, I want to experience that aggressiveness, that animalistic desire, these tropes that were established on the plantation that made it seem like, oh my goodness, you're so wild and you are so reckless, because you have to dominate the black woman. To be able to dominate someone that isn't even existing in the gender code of traditional heterosexual cis womanhood, that means you have to be so aggressive, so violent, so over dominating that I just want to have that thrill. So we have this fetishization of black men. And that's why Khloe sits here, and if you haven't seen it on Twitter, look it up, where there's a video of Khloe and Kim, and they're like, yeah, I just like BBC. And I'm going to say it at that and leave it at that. With such confidence, that's the part that becomes, oh, you say this on the norm, baby girl. This is not unusual to you, and you corrected yourself because you was on camera. We all know what you wanted to say. We all know it was a C, but it probably was a alphabetical letter a couple spots down. But that fetishization comes from these different psychological structures that code this desire that white women are able to have for black men. But at the end of the day, the white woman is able to retreat into the comfort of her privilege, because they take the pieces of the interracial child with them that won't taint their whiteness, but they leave behind the blackness. Which is why you see Kim sitting here talking about North's hair is too much, and North has softer texture hair, and that's too much. And to talk about that on international TV, it's not an ignorant parenting thing. It's a psychology as to why people fetishize a certain race, because they admitted that they fetishize BBC. And that fetishization right there alone can be used to help understand why they do these things that are anti-black all the time. Because it's not about a love for blackness, but a love for black culture. Because we preach it all the time, but at the end of the day, the psychology behind it proves it is not a love for blackness, but a love for black fetishizing features that are desirable to whiteness. And then we use that to look at Tristan Thompson and why, again, black men have this certain love for black womanhood. Not black womanhood, have a hatred for black womanhood, but a love for white womanhood. And that's because when it comes to this fetishization of white womanhood, it's viewed as the only ability to finally defeat this psychological competition between black women and black men. Right? If they're able to integrate themselves into white society, then they are able to regain what was taken in terms of that position of the fatherhood. But it disavows the extensive burdens that were placed on black womanhood, as though it was just like, oh, something was taken from black men. No, a burden of assault and violence was given to black women. So in the attempts to reclaim that, that is done by disavowing not just the historical suffering, but the current positionality of black womanhood. Oh, you're just aggressive. Oh, you're just a little too controlling. Oh, you just talk a certain way that I don't like. Oh, I'm black? Oh, I have history? I have culture? I have feelings? I have a legacy? I have historical traumas and burdens that as you try to overcome by disavowing everything that I have done, everything that I have established, I myself have to deal with your disregard for me, but also attempt to overcome them same burdens on my own, and I'm the one who's experiencing them? That is that fetishization of white women. That's what it means in terms of black men saying they don't date black women. So when we look at Tristan Thompson and we look at Khloe, and we see Khloe literally use her daughter Truth as a justification for staying in touch with Tristan, rather than being like, oh, I'm gonna keep my relationship in the private. No, you're selling your black daughter to the tabloids to justify a relationship that you deem necessary so you can access some type of interracial fantasy that is predicated off of subjecting black men and perpetuating anti-blackness, but also is violent against black women because you demean them. You will X out cancel culture Jordan, but you sat here and stole Tristan from a black woman and then use your black daughter as collateral damage to feed the tabloids with a truth narrative, yet instead of protecting your child from all of this drama behind the scene of a divorced parents or not together parents. No, you put your child front and center, like, here, take this as a resource, a gift as to why I can explain why if I'm doing this. Because it protects yourself. It protects your pure white womanhood. But who's sacrificable? Your child? Your black child. That matters. Who was sacrificable? Jordan? The black woman. She was sacrificable. Tristan, you want to sit here and have these relationships with light-skinned women and then white women and consistently do this in terms of social media, and clearly you're not respecting your black child. Clearly you sit here and you don't have that same amount of conversation about your other child. And at the same time, when it comes to people you be cheating on with, there's always light-skinned people. You don't gotta say I don't date dark-skinned black women without, doing all this. Tell me you don't date dark-skinned black women without telling me you don't date dark-skinned black women. Tell me you don't like blackness without telling me you have a self-hatred of blackness. That's a vibe that's not just given, but that is completely established through this historical understanding as to why people perform certain positionalities, constructs, characteristics that people perform. So I really don't want to leave this episode, right? What's up next? I'm not leaving here saying, oh my goodness, boycott the Kardashians. Oh my goodness, Tristan and Khloe, they deserve each other and shouldn't be together. Or hatred in terms of interracial relationships. I just want us to leave here with thinking more intently about why we feel how we feel. Whatever your positionality is, the goal is that when we leave this conversation, right, we sit here and think about when we choose who not just have intimate relationships with, but friendships with, mentorships with, who we respect and who we don't respect, who we tell our friends to be with and not to be with, that we think a little bit deeper about, why may I say no to this individual? Not just cultural, not just the very foundational political, but what historical factors could be structuring the ways that we make friendships that we make? Now, this episode had a little bit more to do with the psychology of the upload than it had to do with the update and up next, but I kind of just want to set where, I hope that Ttna heads for the rest of this year, where we really make sure that we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to be open to conversations, because I'm not immune to this. I have things that I have to self-reflect on as well. I have relationships that maybe I didn't get into for the right reason of just, I was just interested in the person. And I'm not saying that I know that's true, but I'm saying I just have relationships I need to think about individually to make sure that I fully understand what is it that I need to take away from that. Because without being vulnerable and without having this conversation and then being like, okay, now let me have it and look back on myself, I would be unable to guarantee that I do better moving forward. And I want to establish 2022, y'all, we about growth in this community. And we're about seeing each other grow. And there's going to be times where I come to y'all, I'm like, yeah, y'all, I need to grow. I talked about that in the Colorism series. There were periods of my life I needed to grow. And now I'm asking y'all that same vulnerability when we talk about interracial relationships. We talk about, even if it's not interracial, but justifying who we can and can't date. We didn't even get to money. We didn't even get into sexuality or gender in terms of respecting other people. We just got into the white supremacy understanding of heteronormativity, the Oedipus complex, gender performance, white womanhood. In the ways that that's structured in the opposite or structured in a parasitic relationship with blackness. Now at that point, it's like, okay, there's a lot more for us to unwrap here. And I hope that we can start with having this conversation with ourselves, being honest with ourselves. And that doesn't mean that we're perfect moving forward. That doesn't mean that we make an immediate change moving forward, but that we start being honest with ourselves to open up the possibility of where we can go. And that being said, y'all, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Ttna. I hope that there were times where I was like, I'm feeling it. And I hope that it wasn't, too much for y'all, because this conversation, this topic is something that, especially as someone who is from an interracial relationship of white and black, I feel very deeply, because I see the ways that certain dynamics can play out that end up harming black children in ways that aren't necessarily a part of that tabloid conversation when truth is in the middle of it. But at the end of the day, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so excited I kicked off 2022 with such a kick-A episode. I'm so glad y'all tuned in. Do not forget, okay? Do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on IG at Ttna, right? At Talk To Not At. And then also to make sure that you hit that notification button so whenever a new episode drops, y'all are able to get it. But if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, drop it at the end of either the comment section or please email me at talktoabby at gmail.com. So talktoabby at gmail.com. I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you so much for joining this episode. I really hope y'all have an amazing start and can't wait to see you all next time. Alright, y'all. Bye.